Milano was glowing that morning. The cobblestones of Via Ombra Nobile shimmered under a light spring rain. Tucked between silent alleyways and designer showrooms, Casa Aurelia stood like a temple. Dark stone walls, arched wooden door, and the faint scent of sandalwood and roses in the air. Maye Musk, elegant even in simplicity, approached the door. It was her 76th birthday, and she had come alone. No entourage, no stylist. Just a simple navy raincoat, gray sneakers, and a warm smile that hoped for kindness. Inside, luxury hummed in velvet tones and golden silence. But outside, a man named Ricardo, the doorman, eyed her skeptically. "We're closed," he said firmly, without even checking the time. Maye blinked. "Really? I saw someone walk in just now." "Private event. Invitations only," Ricardo said, still not moving. Another woman, dressed in designer red, walked past him and was greeted with a smile. Maye stood in place. For a moment, then she nodded gently, said thank you, and walked away, back into the rain, the wind, the rejection. From behind the glass, Chiara, a young boutique assistant, watched the scene unfold. She gripped the velvet curtain, but said nothing, her face flushed with shame. She had read somewhere that dignity and fashion should walk hand in hand, but here they had just parted ways. Back in her modest hotel, Maye placed her bag on the bed and sat in silence. She looked out the window. Rain tapped at the glass, slow and steady, like a heart trying to stay calm. Messages buzzed on her phone, birthday wishes from friends, her children, even a video from her youngest granddaughter. But she didn't feel like replying. Then Elon called. His voice, warm and familiar, filled the screen. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said with a smile. "Where are you?" "In Milan," she replied. "I wanted to buy myself a scarf." Elon noticed the shift in her tone, the hesitation, the sadness hiding behind her soft voice. "Did something happen?" She sighed. "They wouldn't let me in, Elon. Casa Aurelia said it was a private event, but I saw them letting others in." Elon's smile faded. His face tightened. "What was the doorman's name?" "No, don't. I just wanted to tell someone, that's all," she said quickly. "Please don't do anything dramatic." He didn't promise. He simply nodded, his jaw tight. After they ended the call, Maye stared at the wall. She remembered years long gone when she couldn't afford shoes for all her kids, when she walked to jobs in the dark, when she smiled so they wouldn't worry. Elon had always noticed. Even as a boy, he would ball his little fists when people looked down on her. She knew that look on his face. And somewhere across the ocean, in a high-rise filled with silent screens and glowing maps, Elon Musk walked into his office and said one sentence to his assistant. "Find out who owns Casa Aurelia." Orange heart, if this moment moved you even a little, don't just scroll past. Drop a like and hit subscribe, not because I told you to, but because you know this story is going somewhere worth staying for. You'll want to be here when the door finally opens. It was still raining when Maye Musk returned to her modest hotel room near Piazza Cadorna, her travel umbrella dripping beside the door. She didn't bother turning on the lights. The dim Milanese afternoon filtered through the sheer curtains, casting soft shadows on the beige walls. She placed the shopping bag with a single postcard from the Duomo on the desk. It wasn't what she'd planned to bring back from her birthday outing. She sat on the edge of the bed, her coat still damp, and slowly took off her shoes. For a long moment, she stared at her hands, wrinkled, elegant, trembling just slightly. All the poise of her years, all the armor she had built from decades of standing tall as a mother, a model, a survivor, it had cracked with a single sentence from a man paid to open doors. Her phone buzzed gently on the nightstand. Birthday messages. Her daughter Tosca had sent a video of her dog in a party hat. Kimball had left a voice note singing "Happy Birthday" with an exaggerated Italian accent. Elon's message was a simple, "Call me when you can, Mom. I love you." She hesitated, clutching the phone in both hands. Finally, she tapped to start a video call. Elon's face appeared instantly. "There you are. Buon compleanno, Mom." His smile was genuine, boyish even, but his eyes narrowed almost immediately. Wait, something happened. Maye tried to brush it off. "Oh, nothing. I just got caught in the rain." "Mom." His voice softened but held firm. "What happened?" She sighed. And then, as if the words had been waiting for permission, she told him. About the doorman. About being told to try the tourist shops by the canal. About the humiliation, not for what was said, but how it was said. Quietly, cruelly, with a smile too polished to be kind. For a few seconds, Elon didn't speak. He simply stared, his jaw tightening. "What was the name of the store?" he finally asked. "It's not important." "Mom." "Casa Aurelia." "And the doorman?" "His name was Lorenzo, I think." He nodded slowly, already mentally filing the information. "Thank you for telling me." "I wasn't going to. I didn't want to ruin your day." "You could never ruin my day, Mom." She gave him a small, appreciative smile. "Promise me something, Elon. Don't do anything dramatic. Please." He raised a hand, palm open. "I promise. I'll be thoughtful." She narrowed her eyes. "That's not the same thing." But the call ended with a little laughter, a shared memory, and a mother's gaze lingering on her son's worried eyes. She sat for a long time after the screen went black, wondering if she'd said too much or not enough. Meanwhile, thousands of kilometers away in Austin, Texas, Elon Musk didn't sleep that night. He arrived at his office before sunrise, wearing a black t-shirt and a look of absolute focus. His assistant, Matteo, barely had time to place his espresso on the desk before Elon fired his first question. "Matteo, what do you know about a luxury store in Milan called Casa Aurelia? A high-end boutique, family-owned. Famous for handmade leather and silk. Very exclusive. Who owns the building?" "I'll find out." "Good. And I want to know their monthly revenue, their profit margins, who their top designers are, and whether they're open to acquisition. Start discreetly." "Understood." By 10 a.m., Elon had made 3 calls to a property management firm in Milan, an investment group in Zurich, and a textile consultant in Florence. The 4th call he made was to his lawyer. But the real conversation happened in his head. He remembered a day, almost 20 years ago. He was just 24 in San Francisco, still figuring out his place in the world. He had walked into a boutique trying to buy his mother a scarf for her birthday. They had asked him to leave, said he couldn't afford anything there. That memory had stayed dormant, a quiet ember. Until now. And now it flared. Later that afternoon in Milan, Casa Aurelia bustled like any other day. Chiara, a junior saleswoman, sipped her espresso behind the counter while Massimo, the senior manager, discussed the week's top clients. Lorenzo, the doorman, greeted a pair of influencers with an exaggerated smile. No one noticed the woman from 3 days ago. She was already forgotten. But back in his office, Elon stared out at the Texas skyline and remembered her perfectly. Every detail. The raindrops on her shoulders. The shadow in her voice. The pause before saying Casa Aurelia. He opened a blank notepad and scribbled a single sentence. Redefine luxury. Start with dignity. And beneath it, he underlined one word, May. 3 days later, the marble floor of Casa Aurelia gleamed under the soft amber lights of early evening. The staff had arrived earlier than usual that day, summoned by Signora Bellandi, the boutique's head of operations for over 2 decades. Her voice was calm but uncharacteristically measured when she addressed the team. "There has been a change," she began. "Ownership has shifted. The Albanese family sold the building and the brand. Casa Aurelia is under new direction as of this morning." A stunned silence filled the room. Ricardo, the doorman, raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean for us?" "It means," she replied, "we prepare for transition. The new owner will address us tomorrow morning. Until then, we proceed as always, flawlessly." Chiara felt her chest tighten. Ever since she had watched the older woman, Maye, walk away under the rain, something had been unsettled inside her. That moment had planted doubt she couldn't ignore. The store had always marketed itself as above judgment, as a sanctuary of refined taste and elegance. But was that still true if someone like Maye Musk had been turned away? That evening, Maye received a letter at her hotel, an elegant envelope, ivory with a gold wax seal. It bore no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It was Elon's. Inside was a single line: 7 p.m. Casa Aurelia, please wear something you love. She didn't hesitate. She stood before the small closet in her room and picked a pale lavender dress she had packed on a whim. It wasn't designer, it wasn't expensive, but it made her feel strong. She tied her silver hair back into a soft bun and added a touch of her mother's vintage perfume behind her ears. And then, without telling anyone, she stepped out into the night. The streets of Milan shimmered with rain. She walked slowly, not out of caution, but because she wanted to absorb every detail. The lantern light on ancient walls, the scent of baked focaccia wafting from a side street, the quiet elegance that only this city could offer. As she turned onto Via Ombra Nobile, she paused. Casa Aurelia looked the same from the outside, imposing, silent, timeless. But there was something different in the air. 2 velvet ropes had been removed. The heavy oak door was open. Inside, a sea of candles flickered gently. Dozens of guests were gathered, murmuring in soft tones, glasses of Prosecco in hand. Among them were fashion editors, tech executives, local artists, and even a few street performers in tuxedos. But no one stood out. That was the point. As Maye stepped into the boutique, every conversation stopped. Heads turned. Elon was waiting near the grand staircase. He walked toward her, smiled softly, and offered his hand. "You came." "I always do when you write in cursive," she replied with a smirk. He leaned in and kissed her cheek. Then he raised his voice slightly and spoke to the crowd. "Everyone, thank you for being here. I won't take long. I just want to say something very simple." He gestured to the room, the sculptures, the golden mirrors, the towering windows, veiled with silk. This place represents excellence, craft, heritage, but it also represented something else, a velvet wall separating those who belong from those who supposedly don't. He paused. His voice softened. "A few days ago, my mother came here. She was turned away, politely, efficiently, but without dignity. And that moment haunted me more than I expected. Not because she's my mother, but because that door should have opened. For her. For anyone who walks with grace." The room remained still. That's why I purchased Casa Aurelia. Not to redesign fashion, but to redesign access. To prove that beauty does not require exclusion. That luxury at its highest form is kindness. He turned to Maye and extended his hand. "And now I'd like to dedicate this space to the woman who taught me how to carry pain without bitterness and how to stand tall without stepping on anyone." He looked into her eyes. Maye Musk. Maye was still trying to understand whether what had just happened was real or a late birthday dream. Around her, the guests gathered at Casa Aurelia seemed equally moved. The boutique, which until days ago had been an inaccessible sanctuary of silent opulence, was now full of ordinary people, and that made it more beautiful than ever. The respectful silence after Elon's speech gave way to prolonged, almost reverent applause. It wasn't the kind of celebration one sees at gala events, but something more intimate, more sincere. It was as if everyone there had felt the impact of a wound they hadn't even known they carried. Elon slowly approached the entrance, where a small white marble pedestal waited, covered by a black cloth. With a ceremonial gesture, he pulled the fabric, revealing a gleaming bronze plaque. The engraving read, "Casa Aurelia may project. Dignity is not a luxury. It is a right." The soft light reflected on the freshly engraved letters. For a second, no one moved. Then, as if the air itself had been renewed, a new round of applause filled the room, this time stronger, fuller of hope. Elon spoke again, his voice firm but emotional. "This is the beginning of the Maye Project. A real, tangible effort to transform places where people are judged by appearance, accent, or bank balance into spaces where respect and dignity are the starting point." He looked at his mother, his eyes teary. "The idea isn't to remodel stores. It's to remodel access. The way we look at others. We're starting in Milan, but we already have architects working in Paris, New York, and even in Johannesburg. And each project will be named after someone who was unfairly excluded. Maye smiled, moved. Elon, this is too big. It's not big enough, he replied. At that moment, something unexpected happened. Ricardo, the doorman who had turned Maye away days earlier, walked slowly toward her. He wore his traditional suit, but his posture was different. Not rigid, but humble. In his hands, he held a small white box tied with a golden ribbon. "Signora," he said, his voice visibly trembling, "there is no excuse for what I did. You didn't deserve to be treated that way. I acted out of habit, presumption, and ignorance." Maye looked at him with serenity. "I saw the video of your son. I heard every word today. It made me rethink what it means to stand at the door of a place like this." He carefully opened the box. Inside was a lilac silk scarf, embroidered with small silver magnolias and a discreet pattern of stars. One detail stood out. In the lower corner, in tiny letters, it read Maye. "I had it specially embroidered," Ricardo explained. "It was the least I could do. If you would accept." Maye took a deep breath and, with steady hands, touched the fabric. It was as soft as an unspoken gesture. She nodded. "Thank you, Ricardo. This means a lot." He bowed his head, but this time not as an employee, as a man, as someone transformed. As the event unfolded, the space filled with small scenes of human beauty. Chiara, the young salesperson, led a girl in a wheelchair to the perfume wing, where personalized bottles were being created for each guest, free of charge. An elderly man with visibly old clothes received a new blazer from the hands of an emotional stylist. A street artist sat at the grand piano placed in the main hall and played a soft version of Clair de Lune, bringing tears even to the most restrained. Maye and Elon walked together through the store like two curious visitors. She touched the fabrics. He observed people's gestures. They stopped for a moment in front of the window where, days earlier, Maye had been ignored. "You know," she said, squeezing her son's arm, "for a long time, I thought this wound would fade, that it would disappear like so many others. But it didn't. It was just waiting to be seen." "Sometimes," Elon replied, "the quietest wounds are the ones that scream the loudest." She smiled. "And you always heard what no one was saying." He looked at her tenderly. "You were the one who taught me." That night, when the boutique lights were dimmed and the guests had dispersed, Elon and Maye remained a little longer. The lilac scarf now rested on her shoulders. She looked taller, more whole. "This door," she said, looking at the entrance, "wasn't open just for me. It was open for everyone who ever felt out of place," he completed. And in that moment, they both knew that, among cars, rockets, tunnels, and technological advances, perhaps that gesture was the most important of Elon's life. A space where luxury doesn't exclude but embraces, where dignity finally walks through the front door. The morning after the grand unveiling, the streets of Milan felt different, softer somehow. Via Ombra Nobile, where Casa Aurelia stood like a silent opera house of luxury, now pulsed with a new rhythm. The usual clientele, high-heeled, sharp-suited, and guarded, had been joined by an unexpected mosaic of people. A nurse in pale blue scrubs paused at the window. A woman in her 70s with a weathered handbag stepped inside, almost shyly. Two teenage boys, clearly more curious than affluent, lingered near the entrance, and no one stopped them. Inside, the store breathed, not just with elegance, but with something more human. The chandeliers still gleamed, and the fragrance of jasmine and bergamot still floated in the air. But now there were voices, laughter, even a crying child, calmed quickly by an older woman who worked the new community collection counter. Chiara arrived early, not because she had to. Her new position as Director of Community Engagement meant she set her own schedule, but because she needed to feel it. The change, the realness of it. Stepping through the double doors, she immediately sensed something different from a night before. This wasn't just the afterglow of a launch. It was movement, life. The perfume room, once a place reserved only for those with exclusive appointments and platinum cards, had been reopened. It now bore a new name, engraved in simple gold above the archway, Sala di Memory, Room of Memories. Elon had renamed it after hearing how May once saved up for months to buy herself a tiny bottle of rose essence while raising 3 kids alone. That tiny bottle had lasted a year. Every drop, she said, felt like permission to hold her head a little higher. Now, in the Room of Memories, customers could blend their own scent, guided by skilled artisans, with prices scaled to income. No one needed proof. No questions asked. Just quiet respect. Chiara moved through the space and spotted an elderly man seated at the mixing table. His hands trembled slightly as he worked with Rosa, one of the perfumers. They whispered and laughed gently, choosing notes of cedarwood and mandarin. "It's for my late wife," he said. "She wore something like this when we first met. I couldn't afford it then." Elon had arrived too, but quietly. No press, no entourage. Just him and May. They strolled the aisles hand in hand, pausing often, smiling at staff, speaking with guests. When a young boy tugged at May's sleeve and asked if she was the lady from the ribbon, she knelt beside him with a warmth that made Chiara's throat tighten. In a quiet corner of the store, Elon motioned for the original team, Chiara, Madame D'Ambrosi, and yes, even Vincenzo, to gather. The press had been mostly kept away since the first viral storm, but this moment wasn't about cameras. It was about grounding the mission. "I know we changed the store," Elon began, "but what we're really trying to change is the way people walk through the world." He looked at Vincenzo, who had remained stoic since his return from community service. "You welcomed my mother this morning, not because of who she is, but because of who you've become." Vincenzo swallowed hard. "It took being invisible to finally see others," he said, voice low. "The shelter, they looked past me, and I remembered how that felt." May nodded gently. "It's never too late to open the right door." Then Elon announced something new, an expansion. Not just more stores, but more spaces. The Dignity Foundation, he said, will start working with schools, hospitals, and even public libraries. Places where people are judged not for what they wear, but for needing help. We'll redesign them, not with marble or gold, but with empathy. Madame D'Ambrosi, once a protector of old-school luxury, surprised even herself when she applauded first. Later that afternoon, Chiara found herself outside on a short break, standing beneath the carved stone plaque that still bore the name Casa Aurelia. She watched as a mother and daughter stepped inside, both wearing simple dresses and broad smiles. She remembered her own first day at the store, hidden behind counters, afraid to speak, watching injustice in silence. And now here she was, inviting the world back in. A reporter passing by asked if she could say one quote about what had changed. Chiara thought for a moment, eyes following the mother and child. Then she said simply, "Luxury isn't about being first through the door. It's about holding it open for someone else." The one-year anniversary of Casa Aurelia's transformation arrived on a golden afternoon in Milan. Outside the iconic building, the atmosphere felt more like a community celebration than a luxury brand event. Balloons in shades of ivory and silver swayed gently in the breeze, and a small string quartet played near the fountains in the adjacent piazza. But it wasn't just the music that filled the air. It was the quiet, unmistakable hum of something deeper, belonging. The red carpet was replaced by a green one this time, symbolic of growth, new beginnings, and sustainability. Guests included firefighters, nurses, school teachers, grandparents, a delivery driver who had once been turned away from the store entrance, and a former social worker who now helped run the Dignity Foundation's Milan branch. Inside, Chiara coordinated her team of silver-pin dignity ambassadors with graceful ease. She no longer hesitated to speak. She now gave talks at universities, led trainings in Dubai, Sao Paulo, and Tokyo. And today, she would introduce the person who had started it all. Maye Musk stepped onto the stage, poised, radiant, and deeply moved. She wore the original scarf from the first community collection, a soft dove-gray piece with subtle golden threads that shimmered as she walked. "Every time I wear this," Maye began, "I remember the woman I was the day I was turned away. And I also remember the woman I became after choosing not to be bitter, but to be better." The applause was immediate, emotional. She continued, "Dignity, like luxury, should never be exclusive. It should be expansive, shared." Elon watched from the side, hands clasped, expression thoughtful. This event wasn't about him. It never had been. But today, for the first time, he felt ready to share the last piece of the story. He took the microphone, thanked his mother, then turned to the crowd. "I never told this before," he said, "but 20 years ago, when I was still trying to make something of myself in California, I walked into a store in San Francisco. I wanted to buy my mother a scarf. It was just after my first real paycheck." He paused. "They looked at me, at my hoodie, my shoes, and said, 'We're not open to walk-ins.' I left, empty-handed. I never got her that scarf. That moment, it stayed with me." People around the room fell silent. I made a promise that day, that if I ever had the power, I'd change the way we treat people who don't look the part. And when my mother called me last year, after what happened here in Milan, I knew it was time. He looked at Maye, his voice softer now. "This store, this project, it's the scarf I never gave you." Maye's eyes glistened. She stepped forward, embraced him, and the room erupted in applause. Then came the final announcement. Elon invited representatives from hospitals, schools, and local shelters to the stage. He introduced the next phase, the Dignity Foundation, starting with a $100 million commitment aimed at transforming public spaces where judgment too often replaces care. "Imagine walking into a public school," he said, "and feeling seen, valued, dignified. That's what we're going to build. Not just at Casa Aurelia, but everywhere." The speech closed with the words engraved above the new entrance to the store. "Not how you look, but who you are." As the event concluded, guests mingled freely. A teenager who'd never stepped foot inside before tried on a pair of gloves. A retired seamstress who'd once sewn for the wealthy sold her first luxury design. And Chiara guided a group of young interns through the community atelier upstairs, where artisans from marginalized backgrounds now collaborated with elite designers. Maye and Elon stood together by the entrance, watching the flow of guests pass in and out. A child ran up and hugged Maye without hesitation. A former critic of the project whispered to Elon, "You proved me wrong. I'm glad you did." As the sun dipped behind the Duomo, casting a soft amber glow across the city, Elon said quietly, "Some doors are closed so long, people forget how to knock." Maye nodded. "But now," she said, "this one stays open. For everyone." And indeed, as the doors of Casa Aurelia glided open again and again, welcoming all, judging none, it became clear that the most powerful luxury of all was dignity. If this story stirred something in you, take a moment. Leave a comment below sharing a memory this reminded you of. I read every single one with care.